evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel, and welcome to a world where Antarctica is a land about to be exposed over its well-guarded secrets and ancient hidden mysteries. Yes, that's right, Professor Hamamoto. I don't know if you've been clued into this yet, but I'm gonna spill the beans right here. Here's the story. In 1955, as a result of a secret agreement reached between the Eisenhower administration and a German breakaway group in Antarctica, a transnational corporate space program began to emerge. The secret infusion of personnel and resources from U.S. military contractors into Antarctica allowed this transnational corporate program to steadily grow into a major space power, which would eventually eclipse the secret space programs run by the U.S. Navy, Air Force, and the classified space programs of other nations. Whistleblower claims substantiate that many of the classified programs conducted there violate the 1961 Antarctic Treaty and constitute crimes against humanity due to the abuse of a captive slave labor force. Dr. Michael Salla daringly exposes the major corporations involved in these illegal programs and how the truth is hidden from the company shareholders and the public. Today, Antarctica's secrets are slowly being revealed by the increasing volcanic activity that is melting the massive ice shelves, exposing ancient artifacts and crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft. I'll leave it right there. That's the latest book that I've bought, and I've gotten about, let's see, 100 pages into the book. I'm in the chapter called The Nazi Retreat to Antarctica and South America. And you know why I'm reading this? Because number one, I guess about 10 years ago, Professor, I was really into the Nazi flying saucer thing, and there was a lot of it on the internet, and this stuff was all new to me. So I said, wow, maybe that does explain, UFOs, that it was a Nazi, secret space program. But so I wanted to get updated with that. This is a 2019 book, and this Michael Salla seems to be all over this subject. So I said, okay, well, we'll check it out. And what fascinates me is the ability to connect what we know about the rat lines to Argentina to what he's saying about Antarctica. And as I was saying the other night, Tierra del Fuego is not that far from the Antarctic Peninsula. They kind of point to each other. So it's not beyond my imagination that there might be this kind of secret Nazi, or from escaped Nazis that have some kind of technological ability that is powerful enough to be respected by a secret treaty with Eisenhower back in 1956. Now, I thought you were the one that had the conspiracy theories. There you go. What do you think about that?
Well, John, this is right up my alley. In fact, we haven't rehearsed any of this, ladies and gentlemen. And I was going to hit John with these ancient structures called the hypogeum that go back to the Neolithic period. These, archaeologists know all about this stuff, so it's not far-fetched at all. Now, some of the particulars that Salla goes through, and I'm familiar with his work. I don't know this book, but I've read some of his other books, and he's good. He's a really good writer. And then we know about the lore of Atlantis and Middle Earth, and I think it's called, Blavatsky also talks about Agartha. And by the way, Miles Davis, the great jazz musician, titled one of his albums Agartha. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of giving it away here, but I'm exploring Miles Davis's connection to the occult. I think he might have, his father was a dentist. His father was a wealthy landowner in East St. Louis. And I'm suspecting his father was read into the Prince Hall Masons. They had a black version of the Masonic. So I think Miles Davis was read into some of these mysteries here. And as you know, as an opera singer, it's all about and also you're a student of Shakespeare. I mean, Macbeth, right? So this material here is not so far-fetched after all. Now, I have a personal connection to Agartha, or Neue Schwabenland, as it was called, right? New Schwabenland. John Carey, John 57 Varieties Heinz Carey, took off to Neue Schwabenland, I think during the inauguration of President Donald Trump, and it raised some questions. So I was on the Alex Jones show. I was in Vietnam. I was visiting Vietnam, and he contacted me about something. I was on the show. So I just happened to mention in passing that John Heinz Carey was going down there. And I mentioned this just kind of jokingly in passing. Yeah, I guess he was down there to check out his holdings down in Neue Schwabenland. But he did go down there. He did go to the Ice Station Zebra, or whatever it's called. And John Kerry tweeted that with my name on it, on Alex Jones. So it is a thing. And you remember Admiral Robert Byrd, right?
Do you have a new Swabian passport now, Professor?
I do not. I just teleport myself wherever I want to go. So I don't have to live in the Bio-Bantustan system.
Okay.
I can just materialize wherever I want. But yeah, it's what's he doing down there? What is John Kerry? He didn't deny it. He was down there. I mean, what business does he have down in Antarctica?
Mm-hmm. And we know that he certainly is a very, very deep connected, deep state guy who seems to be in on all of the deals, right? Of course,
absolutely.
The Chris Hines and Hunter Biden, that whole deal that Peter Schweitzer in his book Secret Empires wrote about, and George, of course, has exposed that. But there we go. Here's Andy's
okay. The fastest mouse in the West, Andy Dybala.
Yeah, way to go, Andy. Now, is this like the beginning of Star Wars? Is there going to be a spaceship come land?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think it's going to be more like a homecoming, because mankind has been really intrigued by these types of acoustic spaces. I think there's some magical acoustic, and this is what I want to ask you about as an opera singer, a trained opera singer, no less, who's been on stage and been in some of these super resonant spaces here. But mankind from the Neolithic age has really been fascinated by and they might have not known the science behind it, but they knew that it had some sort of an important energetics there. And you have the same argument that's being advanced by researchers so far as the Giza pyramids, right? And suppose this is a historical fact. Didn't Napoleon go to one of the pyramids and kind of sit in the crypt for a while and kind of, zen out for a while to get some of the good vibrations? I mean, look what he accomplished in his life. Of course, it didn't end well for him, but so there's something to this, John, and that's what I want to ask you about, because you're an opera singer, and this comment that you made, I don't know, a couple months ago, maybe already, about having performed in this space in Italy, opera, and then it just transported you. You know that feeling, that transcendent feeling?
Yeah. But
it's modeled after these maybe a little bit later than that, but these Neolithic structures, but you saw the modern structure, that have been known to mankind for a long time. And guess what? And this is where Malta comes back into the equation here. One of the biggest discoveries of the archaeological community was the unearthing of a 6,000-year-old, they're called hypogeums. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Hypogum. I guess that's derived from Greek. Maybe the Greek, mystery schools were involved with that. But they unearthed this structure fairly much intact. It's like something like 6,000 years old. And as we know, Malta seems to keep coming up in the reportage of one George Webb, and certain characters, right, keep reappearing. And these people have the people that we are referencing, such as the St. John's Hospitallers and the Knights of Malta. They have at least a 800-year history documented, right? And then they have their people like Professor Emmanuel Buttigieg. I don't know if he's related to the Buttigiegs in the U.S., but he teaches at the University of Malta. He's got it all down there. He's got it all documented, and all the connections with the Jesuits, the Vatican, all the different hospitaller entities, and other, the Capuchins, any number of contending groups in this very important region of the world. And as it turns out, it's Malta itself is just one power spot with these temples that are called hypogeums.
I didn't know about them. Where are they, under sea? Or they just been dug up? Are they're near the Valletta, or?
Oh no, they're subterranean. They're not. They haven't been buried by Atlantic or the Atlantis myth. They're still there. I guess other civilizations came by and just built on top of them.
Okay.
But they're very much rooted, and I think the metaphysics of these people who are in power, even to this very day. People like John Kerry, who's a member of that special club that are all given the grandfather clocks that are set 5 minutes ahead than the rest of us, the insiders, according to Charlotte Iserby, whose her father was in that special smelly robe club. So there's something to this. Whether Sala goes into that, I haven't read the book yet, but whether he goes into that or not, I don't know. But I think that there's a historical thread here that's worth exploring, because my argument has always been that there is a metaphysical substrate to what's going on, to what we've been talking about for over a year now. And another example of that was when I did a presentation or a talk or a reading last week about Hieronymus Bosch, who today would be considered, a Nederlander, from someone from the Low Countries, right? That's Bosch, Hieronymus. And most of us are familiar with that triptych called the Garden of Earthly Delights, right? All these crazy transgenic creatures and just pretty wild, hallucinogenic almost types of painting. But I looked at it again, and there's a piece of art criticism there. And guess what? There is a creature there that has a blackberry head.
Okay.
Yes.
You mean like a Hillary Clinton blackberry?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if it's communicating with Deborah Wasserman Schultz, but it is part of the iconography of the Garden of Earthly Delights. It's a berry head, a blackberry head. I don't know. Yeah, there it is, right there. He's in there someplace. Anyway, as you know, every single image there is just freighted with occulted meaning, right? And all the art historians have tried to unpack what's going on there. But that's this painting here. I think it's impasto rather, on oak. It's on wood. It's a panel. But I think he was sending out a message in a bottle or so, or a triptych on oak, to those of us here in 2021. And I think the same thing is unfolding where it concerns Atlantis, Neue Schwabenland, or Antarctica, and other parts of the world. So I think it's all of a piece. I mean, I like to study it all together. I don't really discriminate between the fanciful and the empirically validated.
Wow. Yeah. Well, this book is my attempt to try to put together a real understanding that I have of the rat lines to Argentina and the submarines and the accounts that we have of these submarines that are still operating after the Allies have supposedly defeated the German army in taking Berlin. But it's more than that to me, because along with the explication of how they did it and why they did it, because they saw, and as Connie Bevan will point out, at the Battle of Kursk, that it was over, that the Nazis were going to lose. They had spent their last great effort, and the tide was turned. So people under Martin Bormann, the Reichskanzler, organized and very carefully set out to export the corporate wealth that had financed the Nazis into multinational corporations and shell corporations. And they created, like 700 different corporations that were used to just baffle regulators and hide transfer of money, but not only money, but also stock in corporations like IG Farben and Siemens, and the ones that had built the German war machine. So this is real, and it represents a lot of money. And so this escape did happen. And when I tried to figure out what kind of money is behind the manipulation that's happening to our government right now, this is what's in my heart. Is I'm seeing my government being manipulated, played with like a pawn, like a game of cat's paw, pushing the Republicans this way, the Democrats that way, but always getting the result they want, and always closing in closer and closer and closer to a complete a control system. This is the theme that drives me so far as to go back to my research into this thing, because of the money, because of the planning, because of the intelligence behind the export of the and not only the stocks, but the industry itself. If you read this book, the idea that they exported all kinds of advanced research, which then after the war they could reveal to the United States, and according to what we just read, apparently made a deal that said, don't bother us, or we won't bother you. Who knows?
Well, John, as I hear you speaking, it comes to mind that you might be onto something that potentially is even bigger than paperclip. It's related, of course, it's an outgrowth, but maybe why there's so much Annie Jacobson type of fascination about paperclip and MK Ultra, all the old school stuff, is that, they're kind of pushing us in that direction, whereas maybe we better look at Antarctica. And please come up with a catchphrase about this, like paperclip, then you'll own it. And that'll be your next book, and I'll be first in line to buy it. But, I want to ask you, remember the Falklands War? Talk about money, the Falklands War.
No, I have to give you my kicker here. It's go to Valhalla with Salah.
All right. Okay. Go to Valhalla. All right. Project Valhalla. I like it.
Yeah. Let's Salah have the glory on this one, Professor.
No,
I get enough on my hands. I just want everybody to know about my dad, and then I'm
all right. But let it be known.
My dad's story, and I will rest. Like the old Irish song. I'll rest easy.
Well, I think, John, I sense there's another book in you. It might not be this one, but I think you're going to do another one. It's probably too close to the publication of your first great book, but I know you're going to do something. I can just feel it. But you did coin this phrase that I think we could use, the Valhalla Project. I mean, it sounds like a great premise for a whole series of adventure novels like the 007 series. But the Falkland Islands, talking about the exfiltration of resources and technologies, and including key personnel. It's not to put them down, but it's in the middle of nowhere, the Falklands. But it has the Union Jack over it. It's a British possession, and Argentina and Britain had a very, very brief war over it. And of course, Britain prevailed over that. But perhaps the reason why Britain, not just because of national pride, why they wanted to keep the Falklands, or what the Argentinians call the Malvinas, is the proximity to Antarctica. It's right within that range, and maybe it's a fueling station. I don't know. It's probably not accessible to civilians or people who don't have some sort of authorized access. But I think you're on to something there. And moving into your other passion, which is astronomy. This is all part of the cult of the Black Sun, is it not?
Oh, geez.
The Saturnine.
You said astronomy, but I think the Black Sun is more of a mysticism. I don't think the Black Sun is something that astronomers would refer to. In other words, so
maybe astrologers. But again, I don't see them as distinct. I see them as continuous with one another. Because these projects, whether they're from the Neolithic age in Malta or the more contemporary ones like John Kerry down in Antarctica, him and his cronies, they're all driven by these astrological, these occultic, these metaphysical concepts. I can't understand any other motivation that would drive them in such a fashion, because they have all the money they need and all the resources, and they don't have to see another one of the normies like us for the rest of their lives. I mean, they can own an island, they can be away from us, but they still keep their hand in for, I think, because they're drawing this sort of energies from us to a large extent.
Well, I just think that it's an argument in favor of this hidden German force, that whether it's in Antarctica, let's concede that it's very likely that it's in Argentina, with Perón, nursing the Nazis along. And the more you read about it, the more you realize that the U.S. has covered that up. I find more and more evidence that the Nazis survived very well in Argentina, and so now I'm starting to feel like, wow. These Arctic, they did have a substantial Antarctic mission, where you can watch the video of them flying over Antarctica, dropping Nazi flags, with weights on them down, and to say this is mine, and supposedly marking out the Nazi German land there, the Queen Maud land or Neuschwabenland, and. And that is all that you get. But according to this book, the secret part, is what he's supposedly uncovering, where that's not where it stopped. That's where it started, and they've got all these underwater passages that they can get down to freshwater lakes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just like what Blavatsky was writing about in their theosophic well, I don't know how speculative they were, but it was sort of like an Edenic type of environment. We're thinking ice, right, when we think of Antarctica, but she was presenting a vision of a Edenic spring-fed paradise in this area here. And from what I've read, not from Solace, but from other sources, from quote unquote more legitimate sources, in theory, that's possible. It is possible to have a green paradise within this continent, which is huge, Antarctica. And there's also an argument that the depictions of it, the representations that the normal people, the regular consuming public is treated to are pretty much artist type Truman Show type representations, because none of us have the luxury, unlike John Kerry, of scoping it out for ourselves. Now, from the subterranean, if I may, I'd like to go to the astrophysical realm at the other end of the spectrum, because there's been a great deal of research over the past several months, really 18 months by now, about the causes of our current predicament here. And I won't use the word because I want this channel to thrive. But I came across and this is somebody I've been interested in for quite some time, but then I've brought him back into my own research radar here because of this crisis that we've been plunged into for the last almost 2 years now. And this gentleman's name is Chandra Wickramasinghe, and he's a professor at Cardiff University in Wales. And one of his colleagues is the astrophysicist, well known. I mean, I don't really read much in the area, but Fred Hoyle is a big name in astrophysics. And there's talk amongst this small community that if this area was eligible for a Nobel Prize in physics, he would have won it hands down. But anyway, Hoyle is a close collaborator of Wickramasinghe, and what interests me now, they've pioneered this notion of, it's called panspermia, that is the origin of human and maybe animal and plant life, certainly, comes from these, let's call them intergalactic hitchhikers, viruses and bacteria, that they're coming from meteorites and other debris, right? But as an extension of that, Wickramasinghe has been, and he submitted these articles to journals like The Lancet. People take it, this is not orthodox science, but people who he addresses take him seriously. And he's been published in some of the top academic journals in his field. But he's saying that he mentions SARS early on, and he has also mentioned the recent plague that's been visited upon us. And he says that it's coming from outer space. He says it's coming from the cosmos, the viruses that we're seeing today. And that's something that I think we need to entertain, that possibility. I mean, you got the, Lee Harvey fishmonger, right? That's been pretty much debunked. I think from the beginning, it was a kind of a bogus story. But here's Wickramasinghe, and we're not seeing this on the mainstream news or in independent media, who comes out with a very compelling argument about the celestial or origins of all these different pandemics through history, not just recently, but through history. As a astronomer, what do you think of it? Does that just strike you as bizarre just on the face of it?
Yeah, it's not anything I've got much faith in finding a solution by studying. It's esoteric, and by that I mean you're never going to prove it, and you can't go out and grab a piece of space dust and say, here, this is where this disease comes from. It's a theory. But no, I wouldn't follow that myself. I'm not saying there's nothing to it, and there certainly is a lot to astrology generally. But as I say before, I really think that by looking at the connection between the end of the Third Reich and this. What I'm talking about is this control grid that is just kind of controlling everything. It's like, I don't think that Hillary Clinton ever really had a choice as to what she was going to do. I think she basically was told, here's what you're going to do. And I think at a certain point, it's very likely that Donald Trump got the tap on the shoulder too, and said, here's what you're going to do. I think that there is that big of a force behind the curtain that Toto will pull back one day, we hope. but until we do, I am starting to think of this problem as a very, very huge force that nobody really wants to talk about. That reminds me of that quote from Woodrow Wilson, who said pretty much the same thing when he's quoted as saying that there is a force so powerful that even the highest businessmen will not speak of it above their breath.
Hmm.
That's the force behind the Federal Reserve, and that is this inevitable snowballing of wealth that happens as a result of the tactics that they use, the ruthlessness, the behind the scenes maneuvering, and all of the dirty business tactics in the world have been applied by the so-called great names of industry. Harriman, Carnegie, Rockefeller. And now they have such an incredible mass of wealth that they can pull strings. Um, Gosh, Andy Craig wrote the great book Presidential Puppetry. Um, there's lots of strings. You can see the strings. We haven't got the fingerprints on the hands that are pulling the strings, but we can't deny that there's something behind this that's really, really, really powerful. And that's what I'm looking for. So it may be that that this anti-gravity uh, levitation engine that they talk about, that really is the spaceships, the flying saucers, that really was developed, and that's the big secret. And so, because if we learn about it, we can make them, and then we won't be slaves anymore. And they need us to be, you know, compliant slaves. So
Hmm.
that's what I think is going on, is just a descent of a net on us, a control net that will make it impossible for us to A, learn what's really going on, and B, do anything about it because we're stuck. That that's where I find myself this Thursday evening. And
Hmm.
by the way, we did hear from George substantially before the show. He's flying right now. He's absolutely fine, and do not worry about George. We wish him well.
Wonderful. Well, John, you've mentioned Woodrow Wilson, his cryptic comment about these forces. Uh, I've never been able to figure out what he meant by what he was implying, but certainly he seemed to have been read into the program at some point. He was president of Princeton University, after all, which is, by the way, taking his name off of the public policy school and the residential college. And that this is supposed to be seen as a win for the critical race theorists, as they're called today. But I think these insiders themselves might have planned that and planned that strategy for themselves to distance himself from the university. But what was Woodrow Wilson? Who was the employer? It was Princeton University. And when you look at Princeton University, you're looking at the House of Orange, the,
Mm-hmm.
the
That's
House
right.
of Orange Nassau. And you're talking about these larger forces that are calling the shots. You're hinting that they might be Teutonic in origins, which would include the House of Nassau, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Could this be one of the families that are interested in what's going on in the Falklands and Antarctica and Argentina? Because
Oh,
that's the name that we never hear.
right, because that kind of got subsumed under the Hanover. When Queen Anne died and George the First became the King of England in 1714, 15.
Mhm.
Then it was no longer the House of Orange or Nassau. It became the House of Hanover, and so nobody thinks of it, but it still is. The descent still is valid from William of Orange. So, in a sense, when you speak of the House of Orange, you're still speaking of the British royal family at the very top.
Mhm. And Princeton University, that's part of their colors, right? Orange, the Princeton
Absolutely.
Tigers.
Yeah. The Princeton Tigers, exactly.
Right. And our friend who didn't graduate, he's a college dropout, F. Scott Fitzgerald. He went to Princeton and he got to see it up close and personal. He's from the Midwest, right? All the white shoe boys, and he was horrified. And he put it in fiction. And I think he was sending us a message about what, just in the same way that, or a similar way that Woodrow Wilson was telling us explicitly. F. Scott Fitzgerald was telling us the same thing through literary art. And another Midwesterner, Ernest Hemingway, they had an encounter. It's probably apocryphal, it's just an anecdotal discussion where they said, well, the rich are different from you and me, right? But I don't think they were talking about money. I don't think they were talking about wealth. They might have been implying something much deeper than the material world.
Well, there was this thing called society. And if you were not part of society, then you had no business, trying to even talk to some of these folks. And that is the elite wealth of New York City. The old wealth around the Vanderbilt wealth, as well as the old New England wealth. By the turn of the century, they had this solidified network of families. And what's very interesting is to see how the White Russians started folding into the elites of New England and New York City. And I discovered an example of that recently, which I think is pretty interesting. If Andy, are you available to call something up for me? Yeah, he says, yeah. So look up. Well, it's on my Twitter, and anyway. What I found out is we've been studying this man named Hugh D. Auchincloss, and go down about 5 or 6. It's a clip from Ancestry.com, so you'll recognize it when you see it. There it is. Okay, right there. Okay, guess whose mother is high Russian nobility? And the answer is Hugh D. Auchincloss, the one that was married to Jacqueline Onassis's mother, and the one that Mark Kulak has been studying as the assistant to Dr. Fauci, his father. So this was a question that I had, was Auchincloss, what sort of name is that? And I started looking it up, and I thought, well, Auchincloss, it sounded like it might have been Jewish for a while, but it's actually Scottish. It's a Scottish name. So and it's an old name from Connecticut and New England. So it's not anything unusual to have that name up in New England. But when I looked at the ancestry entry and I saw that Junior, his mother is Maria Nikolaevna de Krapovitsky. And I had to look up, because when you see DE in front of a name, that means they're nobility. And Nikolai means, that's like Nicholas. Are you kidding me? So I had to look that up. And it turns out that her father was a very close to Tsar Nicholas II. And she is very high of the old Russian nobility, at the level that she would have known all of the Romanov family, all the daughters and everybody. So, and she ended up being a socialite in New York City for many, many years. So this is an example of how, after the Russian Revolution, or in anticipation of the Russian Revolution in many cases, or just after the Russian Civil War itself, which is earlier than the revolution. All of the money started to flee and go where? To New York City, you know, and then the establishment, by this example, because the Alkenclasses are very high in society, is bringing in these families that are coming, and because of what? Because of their noble status, because of their culture, because of their who knows? Maybe it's all about money, but at the same time, this became a large part of New York City. And it's
Mhm.
so fascinating to think about how that population was welcomed, at least the nobility. Okay. I'm not talking about your average farmer from, Kiev. I'm talking about the nobility was welcomed into the aristocratic, quote unquote, class of New York, especially the financially based wealth, isn't it?
Mhm.
Right. So, and to tie to that family to what Mark's been doing with Dr. Fauci, and that connection, I think, is just astonishing.
Well, let me add to that, if I may, John, so far as the nobility, the blue blood connection is concerned. By the way, Alkenklaus is also related to Gore Vidal. The Vidal family and the Gore family
Hmm.
are very much related to the Alkenklaus people. But you mentioned Jackie Bouvier, the daughter of Blackjack Bouvier, right? Who was an Alkenklaus through marriage. Her sister, Lee Bouvier, married into Polish nobility, which had the connections with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And that would be Lee Radziwill. She was a
Oh,
Bouvier. So you have that loop that's closed. That was her younger sister that doesn't get much play. She doesn't need the publicity. She's a princess. She's the princess bride.
she's a princess of what?
Well, in name only, the princess of the geographic empire's gone, but the empire of wealth and power of Antarctica is still very much under the Radziwill control. They lost geography, but they gained everything else. They
Well,
left
then
the. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying they probably just dispossessed nobility from someplace in Poland, perhaps, is all I can guess.
Could be. They might own a lot of New York real estate. You know, the Bouviers, Jackie O moved there after she got her settlement from Aristotle Onassis, right? And that's where John Jr. was raised and educated. Well, he went to Brown University, but that was going to be his platform to reclaim his father's lost legacy. So we're seeing here in a really kind of to put it in today's framework, we're really seeing an American Game of Thrones in 2021.
Yeah. I agree, I'm horrified because it's like what they did to Russia. They just turned it all into fiefdoms. You can have this slice and you can have this slice and you get this percent and we'll take ours off the top and we'll do all the banking. Don't worry about it, Kolomoisky. We'll pay you. And the corruption of it all is just that's how if there's anything behind this urge to keep us to get us and keep us locked down, it is so that they can execute more corruption that we can't do anything about. i'm I'm sorry, but I really, as I said at the top of the show, i I really sense that there's something behind all of our politics that is driving this and saying, here's what you're going to do, here's what you're going to do, and here's what you're going to do, and a real fear behind our politicians when they do things. I think, they are afraid. Um, do you think that they're afraid?
Absolutely, they're afraid of not only the people, the hidden hand, and I'm not really sure who they are, what the families are. The dark hand behind this. We know one of their chief godfathers is one Heinz Kissinger, right? And you have all his people like Fauci. They're part of what I call Kissinger's catamites. We've had Milner's kindergarten. We have Kissinger's catamites. So I think that's what they're afraid of. But they also have another population, a constituency, if you will, that they're afraid of. That's you and me. That's we the people. They're very frightened of the American people and the resurgence of our sense of nationhood and peoplehood that they're seeing right now. And there are more signs of that coming up all the time. So, from what I'm detecting now, earlier today, I gave a talk on a group that came out of, guess where? Akron, Ohio. Right. This would be a topic that's near and dear to George Webb and the group. And you and I are the same age, so I don't know if you remember them, but they were called Devo. Sort of a new wave rock group. Maybe you were into the folk music, but I followed them.
I was out in the cow pasture going like this,
fiddling away. But their whole deal is about the devolution of civilization, and they were into understanding the whole transgenic agenda very, very early on, and the degeneration of it. Now, what was the turning point for them? That's why I'm bringing them up now. The turning point for people like, especially Jerry Casale, who was on art. He was in the honors program at Kent State University outside of Akron. And you remember Kent State University, May 4th, 1970, when 4 university students were murdered. They were executed. That's why I did today's talk, because it reminded me of what went down January 6th of this year. George was there to witness it. But Kent State, this was the sort of the prelude to what went down recently. Only Ashley Babbitt was killed. There were some people that died of heart attacks, but only one that was shot by gunfire. But they came out of the Midwest, and because of that experience, Casale and Mark Mothersbaugh, who's also from Akron and a student at Kent State, they're all art students. They came up with this conceptual group that would do pop music that would be palatable to radio. It would be radio friendly, but beneath that is a highly subversive political agenda against consumerism, against capital. I mean, Jerry Casale was a member of the SDS at Kent State, which is one of the reasons why he lost a graduate fellowship at the University of Michigan. But they all had sort of this anarchic, let's say, interwar, Parisian type sensibility, where they were going to use art in order to help dismantle, or at least singe or burn the dark hand that controls all this. Now, what do you think of that strategy? Was that on your mind when you were taking up penny whistle and fiddle through the folk movement?
And Nixon coming. They're already on our run.
Is that Ohio?
Yeah.
I played that.
Got to get down to it. Soldiers are cutting us down. Should have been done long ago. All right, enough.
Wow.
Well, yeah, I'm down with that. I was with the 70s until about 76 or so, and that's when I kind of checked out and started being a trad head, as they said back then. John's a trad head. All he wants to do is play traditional, music on the fiddle and the guitar and the whistle. And I was working on piano back then too. I was just trying to do everything I possibly could. I was so excited about the fact that there still is pop people's music, that existed. There's always existed this that might not ever have been written down. It was just like as a secret, and I said, oh, wow, I want some of that. I want to be part of the pure stream, the real the pure drop, as the Irish would say. And so I just jumped right into that.
All
But
right.
you were asking me earlier about music and singing and the importance of the space that you're in, and how that's right, and had great thrill of singing in a couple of different great spaces in Italy, and you just get this incredible feeling because the whole place is built, it seems, or maybe you've been placed, because everybody, they know exactly the acoustics, so here's where you sing from, right? But where that happens, you just feel like that you're filling up this incredibly large space. And the the nice thing about it is that that's not done with a lot of muscle and pushing and sweating and stuff. It's done by creating a resonance that you can only really master by practicing in that space itself before you try to perform. And that goes for any hall that you're going to sing in, and any particular space. You're going to have to figure out certain little things about it. How do you make it be part of you, to make it ring or sing with you? And and that's sometimes is a matter of where you stand, or where you point your voice towards. But to gather that resonance is actually, that's part of why people want to go, is to feel that, whether they're aware of it or not. It's definitely communicating to them on a level that touches people, and if done right, in a very uh, good and healing way, or positive way, or something that help people work through things. That real resonance, and that's what we really concentrate on in technique, is building a sense of being able to be resonant. And I wanted to also fill in the what you were saying about um, the pyramids. And what I am fascinated by, and I would like to see who else has been looking into this, is the idea of the electrostatic resonance that comes from what's called piezo, Piezo electronics, like the way a pick, like the way a pickup on an electric guitar works. People that are electric guitar players would know what I'm talking about. But it also exists with the substance called amber, and this
Mhm.
substance called amber was prized in ancient times. And what I'm thinking is that it's a way to create resonance. And yeah, there you go. So if you can create something that resonates, then if you have similar structures, like say you have a tubular bell, one of those long columns, like a chime that's tuned to like the note, A, and you hit that thing. Well, if you've got a bunch of other ones tuned exactly to A in the same room, they're going to start to ring. So you see what I'm saying, is that if you can then harvest the energy that you can create by just some physical action, that somehow becomes a wave that becomes that energizes other physical things to move. Um, anyway, the
Mhm.
pyramids are said to be an engine of some sort of power based on the that type of thing. Now,
Mhm.
where that goes from there, I don't know, but certainly the pyramids weren't built just to make people wonder, why did they build these pyramids? And there's more to it than we've been told, and I think that bears some study. Have you read into any of that? There's at least one person that claims that he's figured out the whole mechanics of how this machine worked inside of it, and has drawings and stuff.
Mhm. Well, I read authors like Graham Hancock, Joseph P. Farrell, and other high level very credible sources. Some of them in the sciences, some not, some very gifted amateur investigators. But one thing they all conclude is that it was not like you and I were taught. It was not just some giant crypt for the ancient pharaohs. That's what I was led to believe when we were, looking at the seven wonders of the world. It turns out there was a very practical use for these structures. And when you're, as you're talking, John, it seems to me you're dealing with crystals. You're talking, that's what piezoelectric effect is about, crystal.
Yeah, that's right. It is. Yeah.
Shungite, and if you can see in the background, I have my pyramids and my crystals, and I also have my resonances. I always keep my guitars out because there's always vibrations going on there, and it picks it up. You could touch the sound box of an acoustic guitar, and you could feel it resonating sometimes. In fact, that's the way people break in guitars. They put it in front of the speakers, and like a new guitar, you put it in front of a speaker and just let it mellow that way, and all the fibers, all the molecules will get in place, and it ages like a wine. And as you know, these instruments sound better the older they get, right? Because they're accumulating all these energies, and they're also accumulating the skill and the talent and the energy that the player brings into it, like you. Doesn't your I think you have a Gibson, right? Acoustic.
Oh yeah. I love that.
Doesn't it sound better now than when you first bought it?
Well, sounded better when I was playing more, I think.
Okay, well, that's a different story. I know you've been busy writing or something, but I would, like to make a request. If you could work up a version of Ohio, I think that'd be really great, because I think this is what really connects the takeover on January 6, 2021, that fateful day where George Webb and crew were there to witness it. I think the event in Ohio and on May 4th, 1770, there's a direct historical link with what happened earlier this year. So that's my request, John.
We have 1 minute left, and I don't want to let it go because Mark Kulak Husatonic was kind enough to drop a question in, and he said, were you familiar with McGeorge Bundy? And I personally am familiar with McGeorge Bundy. I think probably Mark has an interesting connection for us if he's still here. But he was I think he was a national security advisor for Kennedy, and not necessarily a good guy. He was a Bundy, and that ties directly into Skull and Bones. So anyway, with that, any comment on McGeorge Bundy?
Yeah, I think there's a direct line that connects McGeorge Bundy with Ted Bundy, except McGeorge was a lot worse. He was a pretty bad piece of work.
Okay. All right. Well, Mark, if you're still there, there's your answer. I want to get Mark on the show with us sometime. If we'd have been thinking ahead, next time this happened, maybe Mark will be kind enough to join us and make a trio of it, because we know George sometimes can't make it, and we certainly forgive him. We're grateful for all the time he's able to spend with us, and wish him safe travels and well, and support George. He's doing all of this for us and for our kids and for the future. So keep him in your thoughts, but don't worry about him. He's absolutely fine. And we will be back again together next week for a Thursday trio with Professor Hamamoto, George Webb, and McDuff. That would be yours truly. So thank you for bearing with us tonight for our